Hi there, I'm Dave Edwards, co-host of AM Fox Valley here on WHBY, and with me is the former GM and Vice President of Broadcast for Woodward Communications, Greg Bell. It's great to see you. How you doing?
Good to see you, David.
Yeah, how's everything these days?
Okay.
Yeah?
I'm saying okay. It ain't great at my age, but it's okay.
You retired in 2015. Does it seem
I
like
did.
10 years? Does it seem
No,
like 10 years?
it does not.
How's it going?
I just thought about that before we get together here this morning. Wow, 10 years.
Yeah. Things have changed.
Oh, they have. Yeah. The company sent me to an NAB, National Association of Broadcast,
Right.
adult leadership conference at Notre Dame in 1995.
Wow.
As
Okay.
part of my learning process for the general managership here. And there were about 40 in that class. It was an intense 4 or 5 day session
Nice.
with people from all over the world
Oh, I bet.
in broadcast. And it was fascinating. The guy said, forget whatever you know, don't worry about stuff. You're going to have to, the most important thing you'll be able to do is manage chaos
Right.
from here on out. And he was so right. He said, if you make a mistake, don't worry about it. By the time it gets figured out, you'll be on to the next thing.
You did a pretty good job of herding cats through the years. You realize that?
Yeah, I guess. But I'm going to say we had a great staff, a great bunch of people who loved what they did and were loyal.
We'll talk about some of those people along the way here. Take us back to, what do you remember about your early days, weeks, months in this business? What was radio like back when you started?
Well, I came here in '83, but I started in radio in '71 after I got out of the Air Force
Yeah.
and went to Brown Institute in Minneapolis.
Know it well.
I was there for about a year and got hired out of Brown Institute to go to Austin, Minnesota, a little radio station called KQAQ. On the go with 970.
There you go.
And I learned more in 2 weeks than I did the previous year in radio school. In those days, David, I think I started at $80 a week.
Yeah, isn't that something?
And not hourly. They just told you when to go to work. And we worked 6-7 days a week and thought nothing of it.
And you get your paycheck and look at the tax deductions and
Right.
go, wow, I made 60 this week.
So it was a little crazy, but when you went to that Brown Institute, they said, get a job and keep it for at least a year before you move on.
Right.
So that was part of that.
Minnesota, Iowa, eventually Wisconsin. How was the journey?
It was every time you move, it's a process.
Oh, man.
So going from Austin, Minnesota, back to Door County, where I was born and raised, to see if I could work there, and stayed there about 3 years before I went to La Crosse. Was in La Crosse on Alaska for about 5.5 years, then to Iowa for about 6 months,
Wow.
and then here in May of '83.
How did that come about?
I had interviewed here probably a year and a half, 2 years before that. But because of the change in leadership with Susan Kanak, who I worked for, coming in, we talked and she said, I'd love to hire you, but I think I'll wait for a little bit because she was new at the job.
Okay.
And things just came together about a year later. Best thing that ever happened to me in radio.
Take us through the journey. Sales predominantly, and then moving up through and into management eventually.
Well, yeah, I started out in Austin. I was going to be the world's greatest announcer, work at WLS, of
Right?
course.
Oh, absolutely.
And then I worked the board at nights. I wrote copy. I made the coffee. I did a lot of work in production when we didn't have digital. So you'd splice the tapes, which you remember very well, I imagine.
Hated that.
It was, but it became an art, and I became quite good at it and loved it, really. It's probably one of the funnest jobs I had in radio, to put a piece of audio together and have somebody listen to it and they don't know that you made 6 splices in it, but you could never hear it. So I like that. And I did news and sports and weather, and I was the farm director for about a year and a half there. So I got unbelievable amounts of experience in all phases of the business.
When did the sales bug hit?
I was there about a year in Austin, and one of the sales guys left to go to WMT in Cedar Rapids to get his dream job because that was a huge farm station. So I got to take his place. The boss came to me and said, "You seem like an industrious young guy. You want to go into sales?" And I said, "How does that work?" And he explained it to me. I said, "Yeah, I want to do that."
Good.
So we did.
Good.
And that's how I got into that.
Sales management came, and then eventually the management of this whole crew here.
It did, yeah.
Yeah.
I came and worked in Sturgeon Bay from Austin, Minnesota, learned a lot again, then went to La Crosse, and really that's where I started to learn about sales, management, leadership, all those kinds of things. I really never seeked out the position of sales manager, but it kind of came to me. So I accepted that challenge and loved it because there was another fascination in helping people to grow.
Good.
And do things with their careers that they didn't think they even could do. But all the while, David, having that programming and the other work that I did, writing copy for years, I knew the radio business from the inside out, from the downside up and the upside down. And it really helped me to relate to people and understand what they were going through.
Yeah. You knew the facets.
Yeah, I
You'd
knew
been
what
there.
was going on back in the hallways and what was going on in the lunchroom and what people were talking about by the water cooler, and understood that needed to happen.
Right. When you stepped into the role of sales manager, from sales manager to general manager, what were those first days like?
It was scary
Yeah.
because you're in a different role and you're worried about having to make decisions with people that you used to say, you know, so-and-so's leading this joint. Did they figure this out? How the heck does what's-his-name keep his job?
Right.
You know, now
Yeah.
you're in a whole different position. Luckily, I had great mentors in the industry, and with Susan Canuck and her leadership and Woodward at that level. They let me make mistakes and grow and succeed.
Tell me about a few personalities. We'll go outside the building eventually, but inside the building. Name a few people that just come to mind and stories come to the head right away.
Well, sure. I guess I would start with somebody like the sports department. And Bob Lloyd was one of the first people I ever met when I worked here. He wasn't here a lot, but he came in and he had his full-time gig at Kimberly-Clark. But he was a legend in his town, and rightly so. So he was fun. And the sports department had some very successful people come through it over the years. Tom Hamilton left just before I got here, and I'm sorry I missed his presence here. Became a great sportscaster.
Big time.
Big time, you know, Big Ten, nationwide, Cleveland, Indian, you know, it's on and on and on. Steve True, and, you know, there's Jim Kell, all these people that have gone through the sports department and had good jobs and good careers. The news department was fascinating. Ray Waiter was the guy that I knew to run the news department for years and years. Ray was, I guess, what we'd consider old school, but in a great way, in the right way. I remember we'd talk about news stories, and his motto was, "I'd rather be right than first."
Right.
And that's the way, in my opinion, news should be, but isn't anymore.
He oozed professionalism, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
He really did. That was his...
I knew people in this
way.
community and around this area of our broadcast coverage that would confide in Ray years ahead of when a story would break, because they knew they could tell him and it wouldn't get leaked.
Right.
Ever. Until it was ready.
Any others?
Oh, yeah. Let's go down the list a little bit. All our departments. Steve Brown was a godsend for us because engineering, and all that stuff, and how he added to the corpus of the radio station's ownership here, and his advice, and how he went about it. And he was a stickler for good broadcast and taught me so much about engineering, which I knew nothing about, except memorizing a bunch of cards at Brown Institute to get my third-class license, if you recall.
Exactly, I remember it well.
So he was important, and Sandy Schmidt running the administrative,
Sure.
that end of the building. And you have people like that who are so loyal and have been on the job so long that their experience fills in all the missing blanks.
Mm-hmm.
So you learn so much from them, and you build trust in them. So if you have any questions, you go to them. There's been all kinds of on-air people, including you. I forget the year that you and I came upon each other, but I remember the conversation. And I thought it was a great fit, and it was, I hope.
19
it was
years
from my point of view, it was.
Same for me.
And I remember when our spouses met, and that went well, and that just, brought more good feelings to me that, you make the right decisions, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So when you take in news and sports and the awards that the stations have garnered through the years with that, the Edward R. Murrow Award, I remember going to New York with Jeannie Anthony and getting that award. All the awards that Ray got for the news department over the years, and well earned, so deserved.
In 2001, the terrorist attacks hit in 3 different places. And at that time, obviously, we were rallying around the flag, but also just feeling maybe a little more patriotic at the time. You did something that a lot of people don't do. Tell us about bringing the national anthem right before the World News Roundup.
Yes. I think we decided to put it in front of the 6 o'clock hour, 7 o'clock hour. I forget now, Dave, if we changed that. But I thought, we had a couple of meetings, and I thought, you know what? This is an appropriate thing to do, and it can be one of those benchmark things. If you listen to our station, you know you're going to hear that. You can set your clock by that. If you're up north and you're driving back and you come back in the morning and you hear that, you know you got the right station.
Right.
Stuff like that I thought was important. When you run a radio station, you need to reflect the community, and I thought that reflected the community pretty well here.
We almost removed it. Well, we did shortly for a very small amount of time, but it didn't go over well, did it? It was like, you need to bring that back.
Yeah. Somebody talked us into that. And, it's one of those things that somebody said, will you stop? And I said, not on my watch. I don't think so.
Right.
So you're right. There are things that, but we listened to the feedback we got from the community.
Right.
We couldn't always do it because we're running a public business and you can't always talk about inside the walls decisions, but we tried awfully hard to do things for the right decision. We became an ESOP company in 1991, I think, if I remember that right.
Sounds about right.
And it was a wonderful move because it allowed us to incorporate everybody's talent into the success of the company more. And they would get rewarded for it over the years. And I think that's worked out well. It's proven to be a real good way to run a business.
AM radio isn't even standard now in some new vehicles. What are your thoughts on that?
It's awful. Let's go back to when we changed the frequency from 1230 to 1150. Pretty unheard of to spend a couple $1 million to upgrade an AM facility in those days.
Right.
Heard from lots of people in the industry like, are you nuts? But we increased the signal strength and the coverage and went from, the 5,000 and 1,000 watt or whatever we were night and day because we have FCC regulations we had to follow.
Right.
To being the strongest radio station at night in the state of Wisconsin with 20,000 watts. It didn't mean we got coast-to-coast coverage or anything.
But it was big.
But it was big, and it increased our coverage. And we used to get calls about carrying the Brewers, and you can't hear you on this side of Menasha or over here, and in Calumet County and all that kind of stuff. And we needed to do something if we could. So we could. And I could tell you an interesting story. I think you probably are aware of it. A company in Chicago wanted to move their frequency from something to something, and according to the FCC, regulations, there was interference there. So they came to us and said, you know what, you guys, we'll pay you some money if you'll allow us to do this. I said, yeah, we'll work that out somehow. So we negotiated, and we came out and were able to increase WHBY's frequency to the new, is it 5-tower or 6-tower array?
5, I believe.
I think.
Yeah.
On 76, in the town of Vinland.
Be a good question for Steve.
But it was very good, and it's a wonderful thing we did.
When you listen to news talk stations right now, what are they doing well? What are they not doing so well?
I think they get infatuated with being sensational about things instead of sticking to the facts. The old saying, you're entitled to your opinion, but not your own facts. So I don't believe in people trying to hyperbolize things and make them more dramatic than they really are. Life's tough enough. There's enough happening in the world to talk about in a serious way without making things up, without lying, without saying things that you don't know if they're really true or not, and relying too much on what they call social media, which I call anti-social media. Actually, it's just a digital platform that's available to us. And I know radio and TV and all of our broadcast brethren incorporate that into their business. We're almost forced to. But it's I think it's also good to keep the faith a little bit.
Live and local, we hear that a lot. We use it.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Well, it's what I think WHBY's done a nice job of trying to do that. You weave that product with, you have good national shows that you can incorporate into your broadcast day and evening, but not forget where you came from. So I think we were live pretty much from 5 a.m. through middle of the afternoon, and that's pretty good. It's a little more expensive to do it that way. But you get people who represent the community and who grow with the station, and they become part of the community through their daily connections with everybody they have, where they live, through their families, what they're doing. So that's been good for us.
Take us back, if you will, to when you got the call that you were going to enter the Hall of Fame for the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association. And if you can remember back to that night too, what do you remember about that, the awards night?
Well, it's kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because I knew so many of the Hall of Famers and had become acquaintances. They had become mentors for me from when I had worked, for instance, with Midwest. In La Crosse. I got to meet quite a few of those people. So that's what I remember about it. I was grateful, to be honored in that way. So it's terrific.
You had a lot of family there?
Did.
A lot of us?
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
It was a fun night.
Yeah, it was a fun night. And I think it's a wonderful organization. I am, as you can imagine, friends with, or at least acquaintances of, a lot of people in the Hall of Fame. But and now the legends that the WBA has put together for, it's another great tribute to broadcasters. So I'm in favor of all that.
I saw an article recently, an Inside Radio newsletter. It said, AM radio still a high-trust, high-impact medium? Agree?
I agree. I guess I don't know the exact statistics anymore, Dave. It's probably represents about 25% of the broadcast industry, maybe,
Yeah.
versus 75% for FM. A funny story that I used to tell people is there's a big 100,000 watt radio signal out of our market coverage, and the owner of the company used to go to his friends and say, "Are you listening?" I said, "Oh yeah, we're listening." And they'd say, "I don't want to hear any commercials on that station. That's the one I like to listen to."
Okay.
You know, and so I'm thinking that ain't right. You know? That's not the way to think about it.
Nobody's going to make a dime on that, right? Funny.
But AM radio still is recently we've had some weather disasters where AM radio has done what they have done forever. When cell towers go out and everything, and there's no communication. I believe North Carolina went through it. I think West
Yes.
Virginia went through it
Mm-hmm.
when these AM stations just came to the forefront 24/7 and kept their communities involved for months and months.
Right. We mentioned the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association. You were a chair of that. You were also co-chair here in town, and I know the United Way was near and dear to your heart. Still is, probably.
Oh yeah, spent a lot of time there, and got to know the nonprofit community really well. We raised a lot of money through the years. It's a great organization. I was involved with United Way, with Chamber of Commerce, with other things. Now I'm on the board for the new senior at Thompson Center on
Yes.
Lords, which is moving over to the neck of the woods over
Right
where,
over here.
where Woodward
Mhm.
is. And it's going to be a wonderful space, great facility.
Greg, as we kind of wrap this up a little bit, WHBY is 100 years old. What comes to mind when you think about 100 years of broadcasting here?
Well, what comes to my mind is the history, of course, and we're in great company with KDKA in Pittsburgh and KFIZ in
Yes.
Fond du Lac and stations like that. I think of Orrin Samuelson,
Oh.
the great agricultural broadcaster who was on WGN forever,
Oh, goodness.
who got his start, I believe, with WBAY AM and WHBY AM. When it was in its infancy. I think of people like that and the history that goes through all of that stuff. I think of World War II and what that went through. A guy I used to work for in Sturgeon Bay, Ed Allen, used to work for, I think in those days it was NBC.
Could be.
He'd flip a switch and they'd talk to the west half of the country, and then flip a switch and they'd talk to the east half of the country. And the greatest thing he ever did was announce the end of the war. He told me. So when you think about 100 years and what was going on, and of course that would have happened here as well. So it's pretty dramatic. It's a great, great story. And if I can, before you let me go, I have always believed radio's probably the least understood of the mediums.
Right.
It's the most personal medium there is. We did a whole series, you might recall this, The Ear is Quicker Than the Eye. When you tell a story and you get into somebody's ears and you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, you become part of their life like no other medium. So it's very personal. I know when I used to talk to on-air people, I'd say, you ain't talking to 10 people, you're talking to
Right.
one, and they're sitting right over there across from you. And when you're on the radio, make eye contact and use that, because that's what they think. They're in the room with you. So it's real human, and I love that about the industry.
We always call it theater of the mind.
Yes.
Because you are creating that picture for them and helping them along the
Yeah.
way with that picture. Greg, how's retirement so far? What's next? What's next?
Tomorrow.
Yes. Oh, tomorrow.
I love tomorrows.
Every day
day's
is
an
every day
adventure.
is every day a Saturday?
Yeah.
I just want to
Sort of,
confirm that.
yes, I do not.
Okay.
There's lots of weeks I don't know what day it is. Or, what are we doing? I have to write everything down now.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Thanks.
Gregory, thank you so much. Greg Bell joining us here on 100 Years for WHBY.